Welcome everybody, and like any flight captain says, sorry for the delay in starting because the previous panel got delayed. So it is not because of us, but the previous panel got delayed. So apologies for making you all wait. So today, I think, very interesting topic on deep tech. First question, I asked myself as to what is deep tech. And I was talking to a friend of mine, classmate of ours, my colleague Suri is also here, and he has done 3 startups. And he brought in Confucius thought process into play, saying there are 3 ways to learn knowledge. One is by imitation, which is the easiest. The second is by experience, which is most painful. And the third is by reflection, which is the noblest. And I thought applying that to the startup world is very easy, because all these days India has been imitating quite a bit in terms of B2C. But I think we are now finishing that era of imitation. And we have done a few startups in the product by saying, we'll be in the experience stage. It's painful, which we are doing. But I think the point of discussion in today's meeting is more about how do we get into deep tech, which is more of reflection. Because these are something that cannot be imitated easily, nor can be done in midterm, right? So, one of the things we would like to demystify, if I can use the term, today is to say, what is deep tech? What's the definition of deep tech, right? Because once you define that term, you don't want to abuse it, because every startup cannot be deep tech. And if you don't recognize what deep tech is, the amount of effort that needs to go into actually building truly deep tech makes no sense, right? So we have to recognize that. And the second most important thing is, if you look across the world, any advanced nation, I think they have gotten there because they are very strong in deep tech. And the definition of deep tech also comes into fore in that point of time. And if India has aspirations to be a $10 trillion economy, there's no doubt that we have to get very good at this, right? So I think those are some of the discussions I would like to have in the panel today. And hopefully all of you in the audience today will walk away with some knowledge on, and then you yourself have some thoughts on what deep tech is, and hopefully we can cement it even further. A great set of panelists. All these guys, I can confidently say, are working on deep tech startups. But we'll start by asking their own thought on what the definition of deep tech means in their own mindset. So we'll start with you, Umakant. We'll go in this order for the first question. So Umakant, your 1-minute take on what should be deep tech.
So I thought fundamentally all technology startups are supposed to be deep tech. Okay, and I think last few years have been an aberration. If you were to ask me, I think deep tech for me comes to some basic fundamental technology assumption that is moving by the way of a new idea that's coming in. Of course, what happened in last few years that people were building on top of the mobile platform. Mobile platform itself was very stabilized. The tools were there for people to build something quickly and test it out. And of course, that resulted in a lot of frothy ventures. And hopefully, next 4 years, 5 years, unfortunately, are going to be high inflation, high interest rate with not much liquidity. So a lot of these frothy ideas might die, but fundamentally, the way I see is that deep technology startups mean that there is a fundamental new technology, and it could be applicable to any sector. Typically, when people think about deep tech, they say, drones, only complicated robots, and all of that is deep tech. No, even if you're applying a new behavioral science perspective to fintech, or a completely new way of doing things, where one of the companies that we invested in, Karma Life, they are applying new technology to people who are becoming data rich before they are becoming asset rich, and how do you monetize between that? So fundamentally, all such startups are in some sense deep tech. Now, there are some categories which will take time to evolve, right? Like if you're talking with science kind of ideas, you have to prove the science, then prove the technology, and then you actually basically have to spend 4 years in them, right? And then you are ready to scale, right? You can't prematurely scale that, otherwise you get Theranos and a whole bunch of these interesting things, right? So I feel that deep tech fundamentally will be changing some key component of technology.
That's one perspective, and I'll summarize at the end of everybody talking. And to me, when I say deep tech, I also include deep science, because that is part of deep tech, although tech is a very generic term. So Gautam, I know you are in deep science, so your thoughts on your classification.
Yeah, Naganan, that was a nice introduction, fairly philosophical, and what Umakant is talking about is also very important. But I think many times when we've been speaking to investors, it appears to me that it's a case of 9 blind men and an elephant, because many of them really don't understand the technology to the extent it should be, and that's really more in India. So just to demystify, or at least from an operational point of view, what is deep tech or deep science, When you see people who claim that they're doing a lot of original research and trying to solve some problems, these are some of the attributes that you will see. There is a significant amount of deployment of current science R&D or engineering R&D into the problem. And there is a lot of translational research that happens from lab to actually make products. And translational research is very expensive, takes a lot of time, there are a lot of risks. Significant amount of trial and error before you actually get it right. And therefore, these things take time to mature. So let's say that you want to make climate-resistant crops, or crops which are modified to grow under deep water, like rice, for example. And if water doesn't go away for a long time, I still don't want the rice to die. And you want broad-spectrum vaccines, or you want enzymes to degrade plastics quickly. So there are technologies available. In principle, they will be able to address, but to actually translate it to products is a lot of effort. And on the way, you will see them accumulating a lot of patents. And this is another minefield of operations, because one man's patent is different from another, and how they tramp on each other is a good game for the lawyers. But certainly, significant amount of IP is accumulated, and not only in a particular geography, it has to be global. So there are a lot of attributes, and eventually what happens is the products are highly differentiated. Obviously, they create significant value. They were not there before, and now you have the ability to see such products. And most important, from a India and equivalent geography, is the ability to mass manufacture them at very low cost. So whatever your effort has been on technology, eventual product that comes out, you must be able to make it at scale and deliver to people. The unit cost of the product may be low, but because you're able to access it, there's greater access to valuable stuff will itself return significantly on the investments in technology. I think this is how you will see people portraying deep tech. This is how the ecosystem in deep technology works. There's a lot of regulation around deep tech, and that's one of the features. So let's say you have a product, there is significant 2 to 3 year regulatory approval process, crops, drugs, pharmaceuticals, and you've been hearing of late through COVID, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, how things fail. Failure is an essential component of any deep tech endeavor. I mean, a significant amount of it fails, but then that 1 or 2 successes make up for all of them. So it's a reasonable amount of effort. It's a very passionate area for those of us who are in deep tech, and Dipanjan will obviously add more color to it from an engineering point of view.
Thanks, Gautam. So Dipanjan, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. So I think, for me, deep tech is...
Closer. Dipanjan might want to...
Might not... Okay, yeah. So for me, deep tech is sort of part of a cycle, right, which starts with research, and then when you have that, it's deep tech, and after a couple of years or a few years, in some cases, it becomes commodity technology. So, deep tech is sort of in that area, in that sweet spot where I see the title here, the next big opportunity. Why it is exciting is that when you have a deep technology, right, it does not follow unitary method. So therefore, I'll explain, right? Therefore, it can become a big asset for a startup. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a product with deep technology in it, right? And you have just sort of established a market. If that market is big enough for a big incumbent then they can put in, let's say, a lot of resources, a lot of manpower to solve the same problem. So if your problem is such that it can be broken down and can be solved in a unitary method, that means, let's say, 10 people one day, 100 people one by 10 days, then that probably is in deep tech. To me, something that has the entry barrier that is good. And for us, I completely agree. For in India, this is the next big opportunity.
Thanks. Ashwin, your quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a hard act to follow. But as a practitioner, maybe I'll summarize it this way, right? And this is the way we thought about it when, say, we were trying to build self-driving cars at Google, which is, can you think like a scientist, work like an engineer, have the openness to collaborate with multiple disciplines, and try to solve a problem in a step function different way. So I think if you're doing all that, then you're deep tech. If you're not, you're still probably doing pretty good tech, but deep tech might be a slight abuse.
So I think you've gotten different perspective, and I invest in technology startups, and like you say, like you can see, I'm not saying deep tech startups. I invest in technology startups, and I've invested in 32 in Idea Spring Capital, and I would confidently say 3 of them are deep tech. And the reason I say that is, in my own head, the definition is, even if you put reasonable amount of time and people, you can't replicate the product in a short period of time. And when that short period, it can be 6 to 9 months, implying that there is either something deep in the tech or the different domains or the regulatory thing you have to go through before you bring any product to fruition, before you bring any product to market. So if it passes this muster, then I say, all right, you are in the deep tech category because it's a confluence of multiple different sectors, multiple different disciplines coming together. So I think, in India, we are on the path of starting a few deep techs, but I think we're still a long ways to go. And, that's the next set of discussions we would like to have as to what is that we have to do to be a country leading in deep tech. And Umakant, I would like to start with ideas, because with anything else, base is ideas, and where are the ideas for deep tech startups coming from, and what is that we need to do to cultivate that in India?
So I've personally, and through the venture fund, have invested in 16 companies so far, and I was trying to be an entrepreneur. I was building India's first AI chatbot company in 2009-10, and so I've personally gone through a journey a bit, both as an entrepreneur, now as an investor, and last 4 years working at a policy level with the government, trying to stimulate this whole ecosystem. And I realized that there are no easy paths. You can't do jugaad here. You have to build structures that will, and it's not that we have to completely reinvent everything. Israel has done it. It's a small country. It's got more deep tech startups than India has got. If you look at Canada, if you look at China, definitely, they've got more deep tech startups coming out. So what did they do? So they went and built the entire innovation engine. And what do I mean by that? They linked their university ecosystems so that the research that's actually happening there can convert into products, into companies, and then you get companies out which you can put money into it. If you don't build the first part, and if you just try to put money into the second part, and we've done that as a fund. I set up Pi Ventures, AI-focused venture fund. Yes, we were able to discover maybe 13, 14 good companies, but then these companies those are the companies that are there, and they will get disproportionate amount of capital, which is great for me as an investor. But if you really want to build a powerhouse in terms of a technology powerhouse as a nation, we need to build the whole part. So I worked very closely with the government, trying to stimulate them with this idea. We rolled out one mission, National Mission on Interdisciplinary Cyber Physical Systems by Department of Science and Technology, which is $500 million of investment into AI research and innovation ecosystem. And under that, we set up Art Park. And in that Art Park, we were trying to bring academia, industry, and government to come together, because that's the way you will discover large problems. I mean, only government has the mandate in this country to go to 1.36 billion people, right? So they are the ones who are interested in, okay, how do we improve connectivity in villages, right? It's a hard problem. It's a really, really hard problem, because nobody else is solving it in the world, right? And at that price point, right? How do you enable high bandwidth, low latency connectivity? How do you make people digitally mobile? How do you connect 40% of villages which are not connected by the roads, even after 75 years of independence, right? Maybe we need to fly them. I don't know what we need to do, but clearly the normal solutions haven't worked. It's a big ground. 80% of people by 2030 would be taken care of they would be taking care of their health outside of the hospital. It's a completely open ecosystem. There's nothing built so far, right? If I look at learning, India is the only country which has got 300 million young brains, I mean, Japan is closing down their primary schools. We've got, and these are the, the core of, our growth. If you have to hit 30 trillion by 2047, we need to do something really good with these young brains, right? So how do we, empower them at scale? How do you make them learn at scale? And that too, in a future where by 2030, we are going to have 7.5 billion people together with 30 billion machines, intelligent machines. They have to co-learn, co-think, co-work with machines. So these are large problems, and large problems are out there. But to solve those large problems, we need to build this ecosystem, and there is no shortcut. So if we really think that, okay, we want to create next decacorn, unicorn, maybe even $1 trillion company out of India, yes, the markets are going to be big enough, but for that, we truly would have to focus on novel problems that are actually out there in India. And those problems are in front of us. Traffic is a problem. I know for sure that even if I get Tesla in India, it will get stuck in Silk Boat Junction in Bangalore, right? But I know if I build a car that will work in Bangalore, it will work in Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, US, and Europe. And that's a big opportunity for all of you to actually say, okay, can I take advantage of this kind of ecosystem that is getting built? And can I really take that flight to maybe next unicorn or decacorn startup? Like a Google came out of Stanford, right? $25 million, and it has created a $1 trillion plus in market cap, right? Now, could the next Google or Facebook could come out of India? Yes, but it will not be a copy of that. It will be something that is truly unique. And in knowledge economy, we created large service company which pioneered a model, right? We now need to pioneer new models in order to become big.
So I think, yeah, so to add to just what Umakant just said, I think what is required is places where these ideas can be harnessed. It can be cultivated, it can be grown, and this is patient. This requires a lot of patience. And I think in India, we have a few places where this is happening, but need a lot more places where this can be cultivated and this can be harnessed for us to start looking at this sector. So Deepanjan, coming on to you next in terms of post-idea is like, where do you get the talent pool? I know you teach at IISc and you're also doing a startup, so I think you're very uniquely positioned to answer this. Where do we find talent? Because these are not something that you can hire somebody tomorrow to work on.
Yes, I think, I'm lucky that being part of IISc, there is, what I can see is a whole bunch of talent, right? It's, so I don't think, I don't think there's a dearth of talent in our country. I think if needed, then maybe, there's a need for direction. Maybe there is a need for giving confidence. And, I think, I was thinking about, I think most of the audience here know about cricket, right? So around 2004, 2005, and in the movie MS Dhoni, it shows there was a move to cultivate talent from the tier 2, tier 3 cities. I think that, I know a lot of that is happening. I speak to a lot of people here, and they're just coming from incubators from tier 2, tier 3 cities. I think that's where the next set of talent in India really lies. And it has to be decentralized, and connectivity is there. We have learned to do online stuff, right? I don't know if mentoring can be done online, but I would say that we are already seeing a lot of talent. They would need direction, they would need confidence, they would need role models, right? I think there are only a few very successful deep tech startups from India today. So that would go, and then we need to invest in the tier 2, tier 3 really, really well.
So, but tier 2, tier 3 cities, you think it's easy to say, but even the teaching talent is available to get those guys up to the mark.
Yeah, I think absolutely that's a problem, right? And if you look at US, right, there is a good university every corner. And that has to happen here. I think we have come a long way since 2000, but there's still a long way to go. I believe some kind of mentorship is required, right? And I see a lot of activity on that side also going up. They know how to solve the problem. They may not have the big picture, and that's what you need in order to sort of come up with the next big idea.
Understood. Umakant, you wanted to add something on this quickly?
Absolutely, and I think, as he rightly pointed out, talent is by is there by massive number in our IITs and triple IITs, and they're all over India. So in fact, I've been pushing around one suggestion that they should free up the last 1 year, right? And basically enable them to work with startups. That way, they will also get accelerated learning. And it's fundamentally, it's the peer learning which actually will take them to the next level. So if they can free up that last 1 year, startups will benefit. They will get easy access to talent. And these young graduates, they will actually get real problems to work with, because in 3 years, they practically don't have real problems to work with.
I think starting the NITs, IITs, or triple IITs is a great move. But sciences also, we are seeing a lot more universities come up supporting PhDs, which is very critical. To me, when you talk about deep tech, PhDs kind of becomes very critical, or masters at least. And I think those are the things we definitely need to look at to develop our country as a deep tech country. Gautam, coming on to you next in terms of one of the key elements for any successful ecosystem, capital. We all say deep tech, but when we want to raise capital for some of our companies, we struggle, to raise capital for these companies because, either the funds are not structured for it, or people like me don't understand life sciences and we have to go to experts to understand it. There is some impediment or the other. So, how do we address some of the challenges that we face with respect to capital in supporting the deep tech ecosystem in India?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important question. But, if you look at the successful deep tech or deep science-based companies that have originated globally, what has been the central feature of all of these? Governments have funded tremendously. United States, some extent Israel, China, right, our neighbor. The amount of investment in R&D is simply 10 times more than what we hope to do. That is, from a numbers point of view, that is essential. At least, 1 or 2% will really make the cut. But that's the origin of almost all of deep tech. You can't expect at early stage R&D in an academic laboratory a private investor to put money and see it go away, because almost all of it is bound to fail. But in that failure, there is somewhere an application that people are able to pick up. It may not meet its objectives, but something else comes out. And we've been hearing in the news in bits and pieces that there's some breakthrough to be announced about nuclear fusion from the United States Department of Energy after maybe 70 years and hundreds of billions of dollars put in. Hopefully there is some value to that whole thing. But what is the current situation? I'd like to focus a little bit on India and where it is headed. India had a reasonable amount, I think, as a percentage of allocation of public funding to these sort of technologies through the CSIR. Significant amount happened through the Department of Biotechnology through a company that they started called Birac, which gave enormous thousands of crores over the last 10 years of existence and has contributed. But then what happens is the social imperatives of distributing money take precedence over focus and amplifying the amount that goes into a certain areas. So if there is X amount available, you'd like to give it to as many people as possible. But in deep tech, that doesn't work because fundamentally by nature it is expensive. It is fraught with risks. You need to put a lot more money than, for example, I hate to say non-deep tech to make things work. Science itself and engineering research is risky, and you really can't figure out that the next 10 steps will go as planned. So you'll have to plan for all of those. So that, unfortunately, is not available to the extent at which it should be, and things are changing, and we see that happening. The quantum of grants that go into even startups is increasing. I mean, we see a lot of programs from various governments, the Karnataka government, the Telangana government, the government of India, where they help entrepreneurs with seed money. So when it comes to deep science, I think you need to have something else, because this is not something that is going to give you access to market. A facet of most deep tech companies, deep science companies, the really true deep science, will usually be zero revenue for maybe the next 7-8 years. So one has to support this. There has to be a reasonable understanding of which direction they're headed. And if that does not happen, then unfortunately, these will fail earlier than they should actually fail. Failure is something that we must all accept. And out of those failures come some outstanding successes. But Even in the areas people do fail, there's a lot of learning, for the next one to pop up. So I would say to make it a little bit more practical, pre-Series A money in startups which have deep science, deep tech should at least be 5 million in India. And I'm not talking of USA. And must be able to scale them up with a reasonable amount of patient capital to about 20 million, where you see validation. One of the things that we have been fooled into believing by various people is low-cost innovation. Unfortunately, that is a misnomer. It doesn't exist. Every stage of regulatory work that you need to prove a concept, a new concept, and prove a technology is expensive cannot happen at low cost in India. If it does, it'll pay a very high cost later. So I would say that, there is a lot of effort in that direction from government, from venture capital also. I would say it's increasing. We have been successful in raising money. We're not alone. But then we need to see a lot more happening in funding.
I am from the funding community, so I follow this very closely. And, I think our mindset itself has to change in terms of structuring of the fund. If you say 8+1+1, very hard to do these kinds. When you talk to LPs, they have to become very aware of the lifetime of the fund, the risks you're taking. Are they okay in deep tech? Because it's funny, I was talking to some LP from a new fund and they said, do you have any unicorn in your portfolio? I said, if that is your criteria, I'm not the right fund for you, right? I mean, the concept, the thought process itself has to change, because unicorn is abused term like deep tech, and we have to be very careful. So coming to Ashwin, I think you have a very good outlook on the market. You have traveled US, now London, and you've seen Indian market. And one of the key things for any successful startup is, you have funded it, you've got the idea, you have your team, but who the hell is going to buy it, right? And what do you think are some of the pros and cons of such deep tech startup, building those deep tech startups from India? Can you build in India, sell in the US if it is deep tech? Is there a market in India? What is your perspective on the market for the deep tech startups?
I think the market for deep tech in India is definitely there, right? Because if one starts with the problem first, there is no shortage of difficult, important, large impact problems to solve, right? You can take agriculture. There's a lot of good work happening in the area of seeds. You take defense, where there is a spender and there is a large border to protect. And consequently, there are a lot of deep tech startups in the drone, video surveillance, and allied fields. You take circular economy, right? India is a country that has a lot of people and a lot but limited number of resources. And anything we can do to use these resources well and to reuse them frugally will be a big benefit to the country. And there's also a lot of, this is also an area where which is very conducive to the application of science, where the answers to the problems are not known. It may take 5 years of research, it may take 10 years of research. So to summarize, I think within India, the problems exist, the people exist. Most people who are working in, be it US or Europe, working on a lot of these quote-unquote deep tech solutions are of Indian origin. And very often they were born and grew up in India and then went out for their studies and stayed there because of some of the topics that we discussed about earlier, which is availability of mentorship, availability of patient capital, and the availability of the rest of the infrastructure. So I think, is the market there in India to build in India, solve for India? 100%. We need to fix or improve some of the other structural things. And then, of course, build in India, sell abroad is very much there. And I think we will definitely see more of that. I think the pandemic has, the pandemic has been an interesting event in that it has prompted a lot of the talent to move back to India, which solves for some of the things that my co-panelists here were mentioning, which is now there is mentorship coming back. There are folks coming back who will bring a certain research mindset, a certain patient capital mindset with them. So I think the future is very bright.
So I think we are just running out of time, so I'll just summarize what we have spoken about here. I think like many of you in the audience, all of us on this stage, we strongly believe that deep tech is absolutely essential for the progress of India and for our country to become a $10 trillion economy to start with, and for us to be recognized globally that we are a country where we can build really advanced products, advanced science and other things. But at the same time, I think it'll be foolish to kid ourselves that the journey is going to be easy. I think a lot of us need to do a lot of hard work. I think we need a lot of support from the government to ensure that we have the ability to buy and to fund, and most importantly, we also need a lot of patient capital to come in the form of LPs, right? Not only in India, but from Indians outside, and also hopefully we'll get more funds outside of India excited to give money in India. Because, just one anecdote, I was in Boston and visited a incubator called Engine.io, and that's an incubator which has about $300 million of funding. And only those ideas that don't get any funding out there because it's so deep in technology, only those ideas get funded, right? That's one extreme of what it means to support deep tech, and I think we'll get there at some point of time. But currently, I think we need to focus on what we can do in the next 10, 15 years. But this is a horizon we are looking at. But very exciting times to be at. If all of us collectively work together, I think we'll be able to build something very, very solid going forward in terms of tech. Thanks a lot for all your thoughts, ideas, and hopefully, that's something we all can take away from. And thanks for your patient listening. We are available for questions outside. We are short of time, so unfortunately can't take any questions, but happy to answer it outside. Thank you.
Thank you very much.